Entering the Mayo Experience.
That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience. Today we are re-upping on our DraftKings picks, talking about some ownership, maybe some weather concerns too, and how much that might actually affect you constructing your lineups for the 2019 Masters DraftKings Millionaire Maker. If you haven't checked out any of the content so far, I got the betting show. That's already up with Jeff Feinberg. The Super Mega Masters Millionaire Maker show, that is already up as well. So is the State of Golf with Matt Wiley. Subscribe to the audio podcast or check out the video feed or do them both, no matter what it is. Just go check out that stuff. Today, if you want to get into a draw for some Masters Millionaire Maker tickets, there's a bunch of ways to do it because I'm going to announce the winners here in a second of the over $1,200, as it turned out, in giveaways that I did for the first few shows. But I'm not going to end up there. They're giving me enough Millionaire Maker tickets to throw at people to keep people engaged here. So smash the like button for the episode. Leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section and tell me your top two most owned players at the Masters, who you think are going to be the top two owned, because we're talking about ownership today, so that's something to really get into. The better ways to do it, I mean, that's a really easy way to do it, but the majority of the draw, because it's the easiest to do, the easiest ones to win is just follow at the PME on Instagram. Like one of those, heart one of those pictures up there concerning the Masters, leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section. Boom, you're in a draw for the 20 DK bucks, the Masters Millionaire Maker ticket. Leave the iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher review. It's really helping out in terms of traffic, so I'm going to give like double weight to that one. So go leave a review if you haven't already on iTunes. Leave your DraftKings handle, something nice about the show. Boom, you're in a draw for 20 DK bucks as well. And continue to share the show on Twitter, on Facebook, wherever it might be. So retweet the shows, share the shows, then reply with your DraftKings handle. Boom, and you're in the draw for 20 DK bucks as well. I'll probably announce the winners Wednesday on the live show, 1 p.m. Eastern time on the DraftKings YouTube channel, my Periscope, my Facebook, all that fun stuff. We'll be answering your questions, giving away some winners, finalizing the betting sheet. It's going to be a lot of fun. And don't forget, live Cut Sweats Friday. I'm thinking around like 3:30, 4 p.m. Eastern time with Feinberg as we really get down to it to see who's going to make and miss the cut, who's going to be in great position. You can watch me lose 3K again, like I did last year, and I was not in a great mood after that. So always fun times. Joining me to break down the ownership this time around from gupscorner.com, host of the Smash Factor podcast, which everyone should go listen to. A ton of content up on gupscorner.com right now. It is the man himself, the Gup. What is happening, man?
Morning, Pat. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to it. Big fans of obviously you and then Drew B. A lot of respect in the community for him. Big long grind for over a week now, but looking forward to really looking forward to tea time so we can get it going.
It's true. Drew B, Colin Drew from dailyroto.com and host of the Going for the Green podcast. Right? I like the way that it was framed, Colin, that you bring the smart takes, Davis brings the crazy takes, and you guys have a good match. It's become good listening. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah, it's nice. Love having Davis on board, and we had a big fantasy breakdown. We got Dink and Leone on the podcast, so a four-man booth. Always nice to have those guys. They've got a lot of good DFS insights to go along with the kind of golf stuff, so it was a nice blend this week. Really excited about all the stuff we have going over at Daily Roto, and it's going to be a fun week.
So did you accept that you are the fantasy golf DraftKings ownership guru? That's you? That's like your lane here?
Man, I feel like it was my lane 2 years ago, but other people got some good models firing up these days. So I feel like we're still competitive, one of the best in the business, but there's some other good products out there. Feel like I have a pretty good pulse on everything, though. A little bit harder. Like my best weeks are the strong field tournaments where it's kind of PGA DFS regulars. A little bit harder this week with all the public money coming in, but I think we can still steer people in the right direction.
All right, so we'll start breaking down all the tiers and where the ownership is going to go in a second, but I got some winners. I asked people to share the show and do all that fun stuff for over $1,000 in giveaways, and I got the winners. So here are the winners of the $555 ticket, or just DraftKings bucks. That's in your account already. Everyone's already been credited. A. Baldwin. Yes, Alec Baldwin. You know, he's hurting for cash. Had to enter this stuff, but congratulations. I mean, you got a shot at some big money here if you win this $555 one. 2 $150 winners: Mean, Doriarty, and Jack 16. You've been credited $150. 4 $50 winners: Mad, TJ, Turek 25, Cuz 1455, and Fuller Time. You got yourself $50. $20 winners: A. Burn Vet 12, Frederick M, Big Miker 15, Staffy BM 25, Mouse 0388, Sploosh 30. He's a winner. Bounty Hunt 77, Gasboat 1, Law of Attraction 82, and June V, all winners of 20 DK bucks. Like I said, same ways that you do with the Instagram and the iTunes. Best way to get in the draw for more giveaways coming up tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Pat Mayo Experience. You can check it out there. So get everything in there. Get all your sharing out of your system. The winner of the Fantasy National year-long membership giveaway, it was Scott Stewart. Congratulations. He tried to enter the giveaways for the DK Bucks like 7,000 times. Didn't get drawn there. Got drawn to be the Fantasy National winner. So congratulations, Scott. Thanks for always tuning in and enjoy the Fantasy National membership. You too can become a member at fantasynational.com right now. I say if you're spending over $20 on the Masters, whether it be betting, whether it be DraftKings, no matter what, you should probably become a member at Fantasy National right now. It will cut down on your time, and it'll make you a better player with all the research that you can do at the just touch of your fingertips. Highly recommended stuff on that. And we had some winners from the Valero. We didn't do the recording before it had ended on Sunday with Feinberg. So here's some winners, some big winners, both viewers of the show and Fantasy National members. So some quick shout outs. Charles LaRocco turned $362 into $1,369. Randy, 35 into 1,064. Paul Shag from behind the camera had a 4 of 6 lineup, still 10 times his money. That's what Corey Connors will do for you. Andrew Madison, $105 into $9,244. That's impressive ROI. Monty DFS won $27,000. TJ Todd turned $10 into $1,570. Bob Fulton, $2,784 in winnings. Pete O'Toole, over $10,000 in winnings. Marcus Griffin turned $35 into $3,000. And the big winner, SK, he won the drive for the green, $102,000, $71.00. That's not a bad week for a pretty minimal investment. Guys, are you guys ready to win the Millionaire Maker or what, Gup?
Yeah, I'd like to get that title, but it's a tough contest.
No, I don't think it's tough at all. I just guaranteed, just be like Cuss. Cuss like guaranteed that he was going to win it. So I want that sort of like fire from you.
I actually like the way the pricing is this year. It's not as soft in the past. I think that'll be a big topic today as going into ownership as well. And so, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Drew, let's start with the new players that have been added to the player pool in the $6,000 range. Corey Connors won his way into the tournament. He's in. Justin Harding has been added to the DraftKings player pool, as has Sugar Shane Lowry, the man that cost me to make the cut parlay 2 years ago. Not a big fan of Shane Lowry, although I might give him a chance at redemption here. What sort of ownership do you see these guys carrying? Do you think they'll be popular sleepers, especially with everyone seeing how well that Corey Connors played on Sunday at Valero? Or do you think these guys just kind of get written aside?
I think they mostly get written aside. I think sub 5% ownership projections on all of them is a pretty fair bet. I do think that people will weigh the tournament leading into the Masters a bit heavily if it's a name brand golfer. A guy like Charlie Hoffman, I think, sees a big spike for that. But Corey Connors hasn't played enough on the tour. He definitely hasn't caught the public eye enough. So I don't expect him to carry a material amount of ownership this week.
So, Gup, I'm with Drewby on this one to think that these guys are going to be relatively unowned. But do you think that any one of those three guys is actually a good play?
No, not really. I think kind of what Drewby said, there are guys in the tournament, maybe Spieth, Fowler, that people will weigh a little heavier because they just watched it, but none of those three. I mean, Connors could be as a super sleeper if he just catches hot fire, but I don't have any of them as a good play right now.
So I've been tracking the weather all week and just seeing where the wind is going to come down. It does look like there's going to be a bit of rain. It could be softer conditions early on a Thursday morning, but the wind is relatively died off. I mean, it's not going to be like it's not going to be like hurricane season, but when I looked 3 days ago, it was like 35-mile-per-hour winds. It's not showing that really. Thursday actually looks quite calm as of right now. We'll re-up the weather again on Wednesday. Friday's not so bad. Sunday looks like an absolute disaster, which should make watching it a whole lot of fun. But Gup, are you going to factor the weather, do you think, into your lineup construction at all? Or is this just a spot where people are just going to overthink it and try to play these groupings that just really aren't there? Because I find that we do that with weather sometimes, really overrate not only our ability to project the weather, but how much of an influence it's actually going to make.
Yeah, I agree. More times than not, I think people factor it too much. I see the same thing you are. Definitely has calmed down over the last 72 hours. Right now, no, I'm not factoring that much at all. I don't, I'm going to try to play the best guys I think can win and have the best win equity. The Sunday deal will factor in as far as what kind of guy can win if it's going to be that bad coming down the stretch, that those last 9 holes. Really, some of the up top picks are going to pivot off of that, but factoring a wave stack for Thursday, Friday right now, I'm not going to.
Yeah, Colin, what are you doing with the weather? Right now, it's hard to project anything onto Sunday, so you can really only do what happens Thursday, Friday, mainly even Thursday. It might affect showdown contests, but as it pertains to the Millionaire Maker, are you going to let weather influence you at all?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. The big thing I'm trying to figure out is the scoring environment, and I'd run a big strokes gained correlation to Augusta, and it really it showed that strokes gained off the tee was the most important stat. But the one year that didn't necessarily hold true was the Danny Willett year, and the weather played a role that year, and strokes gained putting and short game mattered a little bit more that year. Obviously, a little hesitant to use a 1-year sample, but if the conditions look really bad, I might factor it in from a course fit perspective. I might use it to reduce sort of the expected scoring average of the tournament, maybe get me off a guy like Bubba Watson. But for the most part, I'm not going to be using it as far as making correlations and stacks and things like that for tee times in the DraftKings Millionaire Maker.
So right now, looking at Thursday and Friday, Friday looks a bit gustier than Thursday does, and Saturday just looks like ideal scoring conditions. Like someone might go out and shoot a 64 on Saturday. So even if the craziness comes on Sunday, I'm seeing up to like 36-mile-per-hour wind gusts midday when the leaders take the course. We're still a ways away, and that could just, when I looked like 2 days ago, Saturday was just outrageous. Now it's the calmest day of the week. So once we get closer, this could all change, but I wouldn't be trying to project anything onto Sunday. I still think that I'm going to use the types of guys that I want to use. The guys like you mentioned, Drewby, great off the tee, bit of driving distance, and can make birdies. Scoring conditions can really go either way. Like you mentioned the Danny Willett year, that was very low scoring. The Zach Johnson year in 2009, he won it +1. And you see those shorter type hitters, the Matthew Fitzpatrick types of the world really excel. And he even did well in that Danny Willett year too. And like the Euros, all of a sudden, like Soren Kelsen was someone who did really well in that Danny Willett year. Bernhard Langer was able to compete. It really brings more of the field into play. And I'm just not seeing a big enough difference right now where it's going to get me off like the core guys that I want. I'm going to leave all these short hitters in the dust. If that's going to be a mistake, you know what? I'm going to live and die by my mistakes. But that's the angle that I'm going with. In terms of lineup construction, Colin, what do you think that the optimal way to cut down your core is here? Like if I'm playing 25 lineups, I think that's what I'm going to do in the Millionaire Maker. What should my player pool be? Because I'm thinking about condensing it more than usual this time around, even at the top, just because I want to make sure that if my core hits, it's going to boom big. And where, realistically, if things break absolutely correct in the way that they should, of all like the top guys in this field, like 80% of them should make the cut.
Yeah, I think when I think about 150 max set, I think I'm looking at like 30 or 35 players. So if I was to shrink that down to a smaller pool of lineups, then I think I'd want to compress that player pool a little bit. Maybe having a core of like 6 players that you're building on, but a pool of 20 or so players would be how I might think about a 20 max approach.
Gup, how are you going about constructing your lineups? Are you going to have a condensed core at the top? Maybe take like 6 of the guys above 8,000 and kind of spread around the wealth. Have a very socialist approach to the bottom of your lineups to hit some of these sleepers, or do you go the opposite way?
No, I go more condensed up top and spread out. It's tough to, and anytime you're making lineups and you start building, you don't want to fade people or take Rory out or DJ out, but to get the win equity and the percentage you want, you have to make tough decisions. And I generally, week in and week out, go very tight on my player pool, and this will be no different. And just make a couple picks above 10K, 2 or 3 maybe, and then build off of that going down below.
So let's talk ownership at the top end. There's 6 guys above $10,000. You got Rory, you got DJ, you got Rose, Tiger, Justin Thomas, and then Jon Rahm at $10,000. I still think that Rory and Rose are going to be the 2 highest owned. Tiger will have ownership. He'll garner ownership because this is the Millionaire Maker and there's so much public in here. But the one I want to talk about is Justin Thomas. He is the one that I can see coming in at single digits when all is said and done. Not everyone can be 20% owned above $10,000. So someone needs to fall by the wayside. There's injury talk with Justin Thomas. There's his poor play over the last month with Justin Thomas. It doesn't seem like anyone is really on him, and I can't really make a decision on it either. Drewby, what are you seeing with Justin Thomas? Does he make a good leverage play above $10,000?
Yeah, the first thing I was looking at was just at historic Masters Millionaire Makers, what the ownerships were, like what's the lowest he could possibly get. And last year we didn't really see anybody above 8,500 go in that single digit ownerships. We had seen that a little bit the year prior to that. And we've seen it in the past with Justin Rose when he was coming off of an injury. I think JT is going to hover right around that 10% mark. I do think there are those questions about his wrist injury. One of the things I was looking at, the WGC match play, he wasn't wearing any tape on his wrist. It seems unlikely he'd set himself up for a grueling event like that if he wasn't feeling decently about the kind of condition he was in. So I think there's, in the Millionaire Maker, I think there's at least reason to be a little bit optimistic about playing JT, because I do think he'll very clearly be the lowest owned guy above $10,000. So he's a guy that if I'm playing, chalk down below with a Kuchar or Charlie Hoffman, like JT might be the pivot up top to differentiate that type of lineup.
Gup, I'm pretty committed to using Dustin Johnson and Jon Rahm as my core in the $10,000 range. I still have room to add one more guy in there, I think, to my player pool and either match the field or be slightly overweight and then fade the other 3. What are you looking at from above $10,000 where you're leaning right now?
Yeah, Rahm is kind of the guy I'm going to for. I'm hoping contrarian, but recent ownership stuff I looked at last night, he's kind of picking up a little bit of steam. Saturday night, Sunday night when I was researching, I thought he was going to be just slightly above JT. So I'll have to reevaluate that a little bit. It's a coin flip on Rory to DJ, and I kind of said last night on our pod, you're just going to have to take a stand on one. I feel, especially in the Millionaire Maker type deal, and I'm going DJ as of now. Have him slightly under owned compared to Rory. And then the JT's interesting because I have him right around the 11% mark right now, but I'm interested to see where Tiger comes in at. It seems to be mixed signals. I know in the Millionaire Maker he's going to be popular just because it's Tiger and Phil and some of those main names will be there, but I don't mind going to Tiger as my third play above 10K right now. So I'd go Rahm, DJ, Tiger, and fade the rest as of now.
Drewby, do you think you have to make a decision between Rory and Dustin Johnson? Because that's sort of where I fell too, because they're both so expensive. Although, if you play them both in a lineup, you have $6,700 per player left to fiddle around with if you really wanted to.
Yeah, I've been tinkering with that thought process. I actually don't think you have to make a decision on them if you're building 150 lineups. I do think if you're building like 10 or 20, you kind of have to pick and choose. Rory is clearly going to be the highest owned player in above $10,000. I don't think that's particularly debatable. Whether that ends up at 20% or 25% will kind of depend as the week goes on. I do think DJ is, if you're getting that good of a price as far as the ownership difference between them, that DJ is a little bit better of a tournament play. But if you're building multiple lineups, I kind of like the idea of pairing up DJ with some of the high value but popular players that are cheaper. And then with Rory, you can kind of pivot those Rory lineups so that they differentiate down in the cheaper range. And you end up building a kind of portfolio of lineups that all have low ownership, even though they're mixing and matching some of the popular options that rate as strong values.
It seems like I talked about Justin Thomas and how it looks like he's going to be somewhat underowned. It doesn't seem like anyone is super intrigued by Justin Rose. And this generally happens with Justin Rose. He's not a super fun guy to talk about, but is his ownership just kind of set in that that at least 15%, probably more of the field is just going to use Justin Rose, Colin?
I don't think so. I don't think it's necessarily anchored there because DJ is and Rory are up above. DJ is not that hard to get to from Rose. And then you have Rahm, who's projected to be popular. One of the things about the DraftKings pricing this year is it's a little bit steeper. There's more guys above $10,000 than we've seen the last 2 years. And people also love building balanced rosters with all the talented guys. So I think 90% or so rosters start with at least one guy above $10,000. But that does mean that plenty of these guys are going to end up with 10 to 15% ownership. And Even someone like Tiger last year, who got just above 20%, I don't see him hitting that marks with the mixed signals about, the sentiment, even in a public tournament like the Millionaire Maker. I think Tiger will be below 20% owned. And I just think in general, the ownership other than Rory is going to get mostly spread out in this range.
You mentioned that balance build as it pertains to constructing lineups, that you do think that people will use at least one guy above $10,000. I'm with you on that. Is there any merit to just crossing out all of the $10,000 guys and have a super balance build with the 9K and 8K guys? Because it's not like they're devoid of win equity. We know the guys at the top, are the actual betting favorites to win, the percentage favorites to win. That's why they carry that price tag. But if you want to play some of the chalkier guys, like you threw out Matt Kuchar, Sergio, I think Hideki is going to carry a lot of ownership, even Fowler. If you want to start with Fowler, is that a good way to use chalkier players and not have to worry about leaving money on the table or pivoting, knowing that very few people are actually going to construct their rosters that way?
Yeah, I actually like the idea more of spending up, just because I think most of those guys are at like 10 to 15% ownership, whereas the balanced build guys end up kind of in the 15 to 20% range. So I think you're getting a little bit less win equity from the golfer, a little bit higher ownership, definitely higher 6-6 odds as far as generating all your guys through the cut. But that's not something you're necessarily thinking about in the Millionaire Maker. I do think the balance builds always have some role, because it's, especially in a deep field, these guys are very live to win the event. I do think you run into, if you're going to use a full cap and a balanced build, you run into a lot of potential duplicates. And so I would definitely advocate for setting a cap as far as the total projected ownership on your roster, especially if you're going with a full salary cap balanced build.
Gup, do you think that you'll play any lineup that doesn't have one of the 10K guys in it?
Yeah, and I'm doing 150. I definitely would. If I'm doing 2025, I don't know if I would go balanced completely, because you're already, not leveraged. The guys are doing 100+ type builds. But it'd be super contrarian for sure. I agree with Drewby that the way that the pricing is, and those, you got 6 up top there, that, it's a tighter field, and you have to have someone up there you think that can win it all.
So let's drop into this $9,000 area. I talked about Ricky. He's at $9,700. Brooks, Bryson, Fleetwood down to 92. And then you got Jason Day and Paul Casey to round out the entire $9,000 area. Gup, where do you think most of the people will be going here? Because I think it's going to be some sort of collection of Ricky, Tommy Fleetwood, and Paul Casey. I think you're going to see those 3 guys be the highest owned, which leads me, I was thinking Jason Day because no one's going to own him, but I kind of like Bryson. That's where my mind goes to here. He gained a bunch of strokes off the tee at last year's Masters, lost them all on the greens. He's sort of out of sorts himself right now. It seems like the computer broke down at WGC Mexico, and he hasn't been the same since. I think it's risky and volatile to go with Bryson, but I think you might get nice leverage on him, and he's shown that he can play here. And if it's going to be a course that requires a lot of strategy to get around and just know-how and actually executing that game plan, much like Tiger, Bryson's one of the best guys at the field of actually coming up with a real approach, a real strategy, and putting it into action.
Yeah, the top 2 I have is Casey and Fowler in this range right now. I agree. So, this morning was monitoring DeChambeau's, if he's drifting in the betting market to see, is that going to correlate to DraftKings? Is he going to be lower owned? I have him single digits right now, and so I do agree that a guy like that, you can get huge leverage on, that he can be in play. Whereas a few days ago, he wasn't really on my radar. But or you could take the other stance. If he winds up getting a 35-40 to 1, and you want to take an outright on him and then just fade and DK, that could be a play as well. But I don't mind playing him at all.
Yeah, I think I might just do both. I'm waiting for that drift. Like you mentioned, you've seen it as low as 33 to 1 right now. There's the 35 number out there for Bryson too. I know a lot of people jumped in on an 80 to 1 over the swing. I missed out on that. So I'm getting a bit of Bryson FOMO here. And I still have to figure out what I want to do at the very top end. Drewby, what are you seeing as the highest projected ownership in this range? And have I overrated how popular Fleetwood's going to be? Because that's just sort of every time Fleetwood plays, people own him. But obviously in this situation, and Casey might actually be the one.
No, I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be Fowler at first. For me, I think that's clearly the top owned guy, one of the highest owned players in general. I have him just above 20% ownership. And then I have Fleetwood narrowly ahead of Casey. I think there are a couple of reasons for that, but I think the biggest one is a lot of the people who leverage strokes gained data and modeling for that are going to see Fleetwood pop a bunch in those stat models. And he's been in great form this year. He's a popular name in DFS. He's got enough mainstream attention. And there's not really too many negative narratives about Fleetwood, whereas there are certainly people who don't like Paul Casey. I don't think there are too many people who are anti-Fleetwood. So I think Fowler and Fleetwood, for me, are the top 2 owned guys, and then Casey just behind that. I tend to agree with you guys on Bryson, and I think he will be single digits or close to that as far as ownership projections. So, I mean, the idea of starting out a team with JT and Bryson, you're probably less than 1% of the field is going to take that approach. And so if you want to jam in Kuchar and some of those popular value options because you don't like, the differentiated options down there, then starting very contrarian up top, I mean, you could separate yourself from 99% of the field just with a Bryson JT build.
Yeah, even if it's not JT and Bryson, although that would leave an awful lot of salary cap to play with at the bottom of your lineup. And like you mentioned, you could definitely have those chalkier popular players down in the 7K range and even a Charlie Hoffman in the 6 if you really wanted to go there. But even if you went like Rory Bryson or Dustin Bryson or even Rom Bryson to start your teams, I don't think that's going to be super popular either. Bryson could be a key to unlocking overall total ownership in some of these teams just to make your team slightly different. And I think that Bryson has as good of a chance of winning as all the other guys that we mentioned, as the Fowlers, as the Fleetwoods and Caseys of the world. But of those 3 chalk guys, Drewby, which one would you be the most inclined to actually use in lineups?
Of those 3 guys, I think it would probably be Fleetwood just because a little bit of a price discount from Fowler. I think that he fits with some of the top heavy builds a little bit easier than Fowler does. So if I was starting a build with Fowler, that would be kind of how I'd be looking to use him. I don't think I'm going to necessarily do that a ton in my lineups. And so I think I'll try to get up from Fowler, and then Fleetwood can at least be a secondary player on some of those teams.
Gup, where are you looking in this range? Of those 3 guys, which of the chalky ones would you eat?
Yeah, so Fleetwood's the highest rated in my model as of this morning. I like him. I don't like Drewby saying that he's going to gain ownership. I was kind of hoping he kind of go into the radar, but I agree. I kind of said last night, I felt that the price that Ricky was on for this year, with there being so many in the 5-digit, 10K or above, like he could be in a dead zone in a sense. He's super popular, but most people would go up or go down because there's still a lot of talent there. And I wonder where that's going to shake out for Ricky. And it'll be a big decision tomorrow if I think he's going to start getting a little under-owned. I don't mind going to Fowler, but Fleetwood's number 1 in that range for me right now.
See, I would find it hard to believe that Fowler comes in under-owned, just by even the way that he kind of like rallied a little bit. He lingered at Valero. He looked good enough. He has the win this year. He has the 2nd place last year, and people love him. That I would think that although Rom is picking up steam as a popular play, that if really you put a gun to people's head and they were even like more casual players in the Millionaire Maker and told them to choose between Rom and Ricky at right around the same price, that like 4-1 people are going to pick Ricky. And I think that's where his ownership would come from. If anything, I could see Fleetwood ending up being under-owned solely because there's all those other popular names around him, and not like low-owned, but like 15% instead of 25%. Although whenever we think that Fleetwood comes in under-owned, he ends up being the highest-owned guy. So he's always going to carry that as well. So it's a really difficult decision to make. But besides Bryson, Drewby, you have Jason Day in this range and you have Brooks in this range. What are you seeing for those 3 guys outside, or the other 2 guys outside of Bryson? Because did they make good leverage plays too?
Yeah, I think Day will be 10% owned, maybe a touch higher than that. I think he'll carry a little bit more ownership than Bryson, but not a dramatic amount. So have him as pretty clearly the 2nd lowest owned guy in this group. It's definitely really reliant on his short game a lot of the time. And so that's one of the players I guess you would think about a little bit in a weather scenario where the weather looks like it's going to be chaotic, where it looks like the short game might be tested a little bit more. Maybe I would consider Jason Day a little bit more in that type of format. Regardless, though, I do think in a mass multi-entry scenario for the Millionaire Maker, he provides a ton of leverage. I do think he's the type of player that you want to get into some of your lineups with an overweight stance.
So between Bryson, Brooks, and Day, Gup, it seems like we all kind of like Bryson in this spot. We like his upside. So between Brooks and Day, obviously Brooks is a bit more expensive and he's going to be higher owned. But do you have a preference between those 2, or are you just like, you know what? I'm going to cross these guys out of my player pool?
I'm not on Brooks. I think I would move him out of my pool. Day is a, kind of plug your nose and jump in guy if you're in on him. I mean, his history here is great. And this is one of the few tournaments, if the only, that, I know the big battles in the Twitter world on course history matters or doesn't matter, but the data behind shows that if any tournament, this is one to kind of pay attention to. And if he could withdraw by the 5th hole and you're dead, or he could top 10 this thing. So I don't mind going there, especially if he's going to flirt around that 10% mark as some leverage in this zone.
So I'm getting a report right now that's saying that there's lightning and everyone has evacuated the course at Augusta National. Today was the first day that the debutants, the first timers at the Masters, were going to get their practice rounds in. Gup, do you think that impacts those guys at all? Because we know that there's always the famous narrative that Fuzzy Zoeller is the last first timer to win at Augusta. That was in 1979. Last year, Tony Finau was the only first timer to finish inside the top 10, and he did it with a broken ankle, which is super impressive. But does this hurt those first timers in your mind a little bit more, the fact that they're not going to get these practice rounds in?
It does. Yeah. Last night we discussed that a little bit. I think, it's nothing to, take someone away or, lower a little bit maybe, but I definitely think if they don't get much practice in, and then depending on who the player is, if he doesn't have someone that's willing to walk around the course and be, a little friendly, Tiger's obviously not going to take someone by his hands and walk up and show him where to putt and everything. But, a Ricky Fowler type could, I know Victor's in this deal and we'll get to him a little later, that could help him. But overall, yeah, if they don't get to practice much or putt on these greens, and then tomorrow doesn't look real great either, I think it could hurt them a little bit being first time out here.
And it could hurt them too in terms of like actually judging the speed of the greens, because if they go and have their practice rounds like tomorrow morning and it's still super dewy or it's a bit wet, that might not actually translate to what the speed of the greens are going to be on Friday. And I remember Adam Hadwin, I think it was 2 years ago in his debut, like the guy just could not figure out how to putt on these greens day one. He was just blowing everything past the hole. And this is when Adam Hadwin was in his stretch of he was making everything. Like he was one of the superior short game and putters on tour, and these greens just confounded him. So if you're throwing that into the mix anyway, that these are some of the most difficult putting complexes to begin with that players will see all year, some of the fastest greens, and now you're not giving them time to actually practice on them in the way that they're actually going to play, that could be super difficult. We could see some big blow up numbers. Drewby, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, I do think that makes sense. Data Golf wrote a really interesting article for Pinnacle Sports this week, and what they talked about was course history at Augusta in general, and they actually found it more predictive than a lot of their previous analysis had across kind of all courses. So that alone was really interesting. Someone who's been anti-course history saying that course history is predictive at Augusta. And then they also analyzed the first timer narrative, and they found that relative to their expectations, that first timers do perform below their baseline about 1/10 of a stroke per round. So not a crazy drop, but then if you also take out the practice rounds, I think you could expect potentially a bigger drop than that. I don't think you just cross them off entirely, but I do think you want to kind of dock what their baseline projections might be.
So I think that figuring out how to cross people off, that's the hardest part to do with the Masters, because all these guys are good. So what would be the strategy of getting rid of guys from your player pool just to begin with? Like when you look at the bottom of the field, I said this on the Super Mega Show, which everyone should go watch. Don't be afraid to go do that. Go back and listen for a third time, a fourth time. I need them downloads, need them clicks, need them views. Anything helps. But like the bottom 25 guys in this field, like all the amateurs, I'm not using them. Any of the seniors, I'm not going to use those guys. And I can make a case for crossing off most of the first timers. There's 18 now in the field with Corey Connors. Like maybe I'll use one or two, maybe, but those just seem like very logical cross-offs to me right off the hop. Colin, how are you cutting down the player pool?
Yeah, I think I'm going to cut people off based on their top 20 probabilities using the Data Golf model at Daily Roto. So what I'm looking for is guys who are at least 15% odds to T20. Those guys will enter my submission as far as my builds. And I think that cuts off a good chunk of the field. It kind of cuts off a bunch of the first timers already just because they're not the highest quality golfers. It does leave some of the higher upside guys or some of the European Tour players in there. And then it gets rid of the Bernard Longers and the, Vijay Singhs and guys like that from the player pool. So that's going to be the threshold that I set for my submission in MME builds, is at least 15% odds to T20.
So Gup, what are you looking at in terms of cutting down your player pool? How do you just launch a whole bunch of people off the hop?
Yeah, similar as what Derby said. And then, one thing I'll look at as especially get to tomorrow afternoon, evening is, if there's guys down here that are just looking to be massively over-owned with a very low or even top 20 type projection, I'm not going to jump on a Kisner if he's going to be way over-owned at this price. Not saying he will be, but that's a potential one that's caught a little fire lately. last night I eliminated about 18 guys off the bat that I just, no chance of me playing them, from down below 7,000. And a lot of that was looking at once the top 20s came out yesterday. And then based on my models, what correlated to good plays, bad plays, and then ownership will be the last thing to kind of narrow out a few more out of my player pool from down here.
So let's talk about the $8,000 range. I think it's very intriguing at the top solely because you have Bubba Watson and you have Jordan Spieth right there. So Drewby, how much did Jordan Spieth enhance his ownership with a pretty capable performance at the Valero Texas Open? A real rough front nine on Saturday, but he did rebound after that, finished okay. His odds have dropped from 25 to 1 to 18 to 1. People just wanted any reason to get back on Jordan Spieth. And I think that if they wanted to play him anyway and they were on the fence, I think Valero pushed them over the edge that they're going to use him. What do you think his ownership comes in at? Because I think besides Tiger, he is the hardest one to figure out.
Yeah, he definitely is. And I think it's going to tell us a whole lot about the state of fantasy golf and what people are paying attention to and what they're thinking about, especially in these public tournaments when we see Spieth's ownership. I've got it at 10% right now. I think it could hit 15. I don't really see it getting too much higher than that just because I know that a lot of people who build with our product, a lot of people who build with Fantasy National, like they're not going to get Spieth popping in their models just because of how bad he has been for such a long stretch. So I do think there's a little bit of ownership that lingers from sort of the Spieth truthers, a little bit from the public sphere. But yeah, I was definitely concerned, not as much about the outright odds, just because they'll take money wherever they can get it there. But Spieth actually favored over some decent golfers in head-to-head markets, and those are taking two-way action. So that was a little bit of a red flag for somebody who's not going to have a whole lot of speed.
I can tell everyone right now that on a Tuesday afternoon, Fantasy National members that have generated lineups so far, he appears in around 10% of those lineups. But where I got the value odds from DraftKings Sportsbook, they let me know where the percentage of money is coming in. The most bet on golfers so far at the Masters, the most tickets they've taken, the most money down is on Jordan Spieth to win Gup. That do we just double whatever we think his ownership is because he's highly owned at the Masters anyway? He showed a little bit of form. People wanted to play him anyway. I could see him pushing 20% when all is said and done.
Wow, I mean if he starts looking up that high, he will definitely not be in my pool. I see him probably around 13 to 15% as of now, but a lot of, especially in the Millionaire Maker, you get a lot of the public in there, and if they start weighting the course history type stuff and not looking at any of his recent data, he's obviously going to pop, on that side, probably the number one course history in recent 5 years or so. But, based on the betting stuff, I can see him getting up above 15, maybe, but I just think it's going to be so spread out this year. I have him 13 to 15 is kind of where I got him at right now.
So in the past 5 years, Spieth has played this tournament 5 times. He's come 3rd, 11th, 2nd, 1st, 2nd. Obviously, the course history, very good as it pertains to Jordan Spieth. But I don't know what I want to do with him because even last year, I actually bet on him to win last year, and I was just praying he would make just a few more putts coming down the stretch, and I could have cashed my tickets. It would have been fantastic. But his tee to green game was still super sharp last season. He just couldn't putt coming in. But when you go back and look at it, he was still top 10 in the field in approach. He was driving the ball pretty well. The short game hadn't completely abandoned him. He was just missing 3-foot putts. Then all of a sudden he gets to Augusta and boom, he's making everything again. But Colin, this year, the guy is horrible tee to green. Like the putting hasn't even been the biggest problem for him. So is this just the excuse I need to say, you know what? Although I've seen the chalkboards, David Jane tweets it out every year, do not fade Spieth at the Masters. I'm really considering fading Spieth at the Masters.
Yeah, I don't think I'll have him in any of my lineups. It would have been tempting if he was like 2 or 3% owned, but he rates out as such a bad play. And like you said, I mean, it's all fallen apart. It's not like it was last year where some things were clicking and he was trying to figure out the rest of it. I do think he has one of the strongest course histories at Augusta, but he was also a world-class player at that point in time. And I think Phil Mickelson actually has a better course history than Jordan Spieth, at least relative to the talent that they were at the time coming into the Masters. So I think Spieth is definitely a guy that I'm looking to fade. I hope that there are great reports out of practice rounds and things like that that'll drive ownership up. I would love to see him at 20%. I just think there are enough anti-Spieth people now that it can't get that high.
Yeah, there's enough anti-Spieth people out there, but are we in a Twitter bubble with that?
I mean, I think we're in a little bit of a Twitter bubble, but we've been in the Twitter bubble for the past few events as well, and people aren't loading up on Spieth even in some of these weaker fields. So I think there are enough DFS regulars that are firing 150 lineups into the Millionaire Maker that it's going to at least offset some of that public action.
So of the other highest projected owned players in the 8K range, I'm thinking it's Spieth. Hideki will probably be the highest owned unless Spieth takes away from his ownership, which I would love because I do like Hideki this week. Other than that, I think that Bubba carries significant ownership, probably around 15%. Then I'm thinking Adam Scott and Tony Finau. Drewby, are you seeing anything different?
Definitely close on Bubba. Definitely think Hideki is the highest owned, unless Spieth eats a ton of that, which I don't have factored in right now. I'm not as sure about what people will do with Scott, Xander, Mickelson, Finau. I think there's enough to spread it out kind of between those two guys. I think there are going to be some people that are interested in Scott and Phil for course history reasons, some that are interested in Xander for kind of talent and form, and then Finau kind of has some of that as well. I personally have some concerns with Finau just not playing at his best tee to green over the past few events and kind of hiding some stuff with his putter. So I'm not quite as bullish on Finau. I definitely am interested in Hideki and Xander as the top two plays of this range, and then potentially Adam Scott as a contrarian option.
So, Gup, for me, looking at it right now, I do like Hideki. I think he's just set up so well. Tee to green, he's been so lights out, and he's played well at Augusta over the years. So I'm not going to take Spieth. That opens up other spots in this $8,000 range for me to go to. And my eyes just, I don't know how I became this guy. I'm basically just Leone at this point, but Molinari makes a lot of sense to me, Gup.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the ownership, I have him sub 10% right now. So, Spieth, he's a guy that definitely, if Spieth's going to start carrying a little bit more ownership closer to 15%, it'll spread out a little bit of the other guys, and he could stay under that 10% mark, not really getting talked up very much by anybody. And he normally seems to be that quiet guy for whatever reason. So at sub 10%, I would definitely have some ownership on Molinari.
Yeah, I think I might end up making him one of my core players here. But looking at the rest of the board, I hear the concerns tee to green about Finau. Xander, I don't know if I really want to get behind here, but Phil, I find super juicy. Gup, I don't know really what to make of him, but I have him coming in super low owned, and Phil is kind of turning into Bubba a little bit for me, where Bubba, if you get him like, hey, but Bubba's playing the Travelers, I don't care how he's playing, I'm going to bet him if he's at a good price. I feel like this is a good price for Phil. We've seen him pop twice this year. He came second at Career Builder, a place where he's historically played really well. He won at Pebble, a place where he historically plays really well. He goes to Florida and plays really poorly, but Phil doesn't play good in Florida whatsoever. We're back on bent, we're back on fast greens, and we're back at Augusta where he's won 3 times. Should I be using Phil?
Yeah, originally last night I didn't want any Phil. Looking at Phil and Reed were the two that were instant kind of put in that fade zone, but they both are looking super, super low owned. I got Reed around the 5% mark and Phil's 7 to 8.5% ish area right now. I'm still going to be off Reed, but if I'm building 100 lineups, I can certainly take even 10% of Phil. Puts me a little bit over edge, and if he catches fire, he loves it out here and there's no rough, so he's not going to complain about that. Model wise, he's just not looking great coming in, but a lot of that I have to do with the poor Florida swing. Long term to short term, he looks a little better, but 7%, if that's kind of where the number comes in, I think that's really low for a guy that could technically win or at least show up here, just based on his history.
Yeah, and the difference between Tiger and Phil as it pertains to DraftKings right now is that at Tiger's price, you kind of need him to win if you take him. A top 10 from Phil or a top 6 from Phil at this price point is fine. He doesn't actually need to go out and win. You need to have the winner with him. But even just based on his DraftKings scoring, Drewby, where he makes so many birdies to begin with, and he's still long enough to reach these par 5s, that's not really going to be a factor for him. That I'm kind of with Gup that I see Reed around like 3% right now. But if I'm going to take one of these low owned guys, I would favor Phil over Reed.
I think I'm in the same boat with you. I've been trying to figure out how much of an adjustment to our projections I'm going to give Phil.
I don't think that you need to. I don't think that Phil carries the same sort of cachet on DraftKings as someone like Tiger does.
Oh, I just meant in our fantasy projections because, like Gup, they're not rating out super positively for Phil, but they're not factoring in any course history, and Phil does have the largest positive adjustment of any player in the field at Augusta. I think it would take him from like 33rd in the data golf model up to 24th. And then if you factor in a single digit ownership projection, it starts to get at least in the fringe of getting into my player pool a little bit. And I think I'd be more likely to end up with Phil than Molinari, which is pretty surprising. I guess one of the things I was surprised is as people are starting to become interested in Molinari, it's like his strokes gained tee to green stats on the PGA Tour haven't been great this year. I haven't dug in on the European Tour, but he's been red hot with the putter. And that's like the opposite of the Molinari that I was interested in backing over the past couple of years. So I don't know what to make of this guy. It seems like anytime I play him, it's during the cold stretch. Anytime I get off him, it's when he goes hot. So maybe it is a good week to play him.
Well, it's difficult to really assess where his game is at right now because after the Ryder Cup, he basically took 6 months off. He came and played Tournament of Champions. It was like a joke event for him. Then we didn't see him again for 6 weeks. So he wasn't even playing on the European Tour. So his sample size is so limited. But I'm just thinking about like results based. Like you see him at WGC Mexico. It's the first time that he played since like Dubai. He came T26 in Dubai, like whatever. And that was towards the end of the year. He plays Tournament of Champions, comes T27, can't putt a lick, can't do anything. And then his game just progressively rounds into form. He's taken some time off, comes back at Mexico after not playing for 2 months, comes T17, that's fine. Wins his next start out at API with that amazingly hot putting round to end. Something like you mentioned that we haven't seen all that much. But at the Players, he was okay. But the Players is a really tough thing to really glean anything from because the blow-up potential at that course doesn't really correlate to anywhere else. You talk about the Masters having the biggest course history actual advantage of any of the courses on tour. The Players is probably last when it comes to that. You see very few people be successful year after year after year only because you put it in the water and all of a sudden you're missing the cut or you make an 8, and that just doesn't happen at the Masters unless you're Jordan Spieth on the 12th hole, and we'll all take that. But then he comes back at match play where there are no strokes gained data and comes third. I watched him that week and he was striping it. Now that's a shorter course, but we just saw him win at Bay Hill, which is a longer course that I think because of that muddied strokes gained like sort of narrative around him where he's either playing in non-weighted events or just hasn't played all that much, I think overall his form is really good and I wouldn't be too concerned about it.
Yeah, I guess that is a fair point as far as match play data and not factoring in. And that's definitely a gap kind of any of the projection models is, you don't have any of that information. I don't know. I'm still just not quite as excited about Molinari. I feel like he's not as live to win the event as Hideki or Xander or even someone like Adam Scott. So I'm more likely to allocate my ownership to those guys.
We really don't think that you think that he's a worse winning probability this week than Adam Scott does?
I think it's pretty close to Adam Scott. I think it's worse than Hideki and Xander.
Really? You think it's worse than Xander? I worry that if Xander gets caught off, like if he's not hitting every green in regulation, he's kind of screwed here.
Yeah, one of the things I like about Xander is just he has kind of every element of the game to kind of pick him up. And maybe the Molinari putting is something he figured out, but that's not historically over the long term what Molinari is like. And so I feel like Xander is just more balanced, and I feel like his game can, if one aspect isn't there, I feel like he gains strokes in all 4 categories and he can get picked up by the other elements of his game.
Yeah, and he has wins on bent grass as well. I think that's something to look into. And we talk about Keith Mitchell in a little bit. I think that's going to be a problem as it pertains to him. Of the low-owned guys here, Gup, is it Xander? Is it Molinari? Is it Phil? Is it Reed? Which one do you think that you'll end up anchoring in your lineup?
In general, that zone's going to probably wind up being a dead zone. But I would go Phil based on the ownership projections as of now, and then maybe Molinari. I'm right now going to be a hard pass on Schauffele. I don't like, especially if he's going to continue to gain some ownership exposure. I'd rather just go to the guys that, like Matsu's very, very high up in where I want to be on him, and I'd rather get overweight on him and fade some of these other guys in the area.
So the $7,000 range, better known as the Matt Kuchar range, I stick by that Matt Kuchar could push 30% in this Millionaire Maker, maybe even above. The Ander curse isn't even working magic on him at this point, Ruby. Where do you have him projected at?
Yeah, right about 30. And I think that's fair. We usually do see one guy kind of hit that high 20s and high 30s range. And last year it was Matt Kuchar. Justin Rose was high too, but Kuchar was 7,600. He was coming in with worse form, and he was 28% owned in the Millionaire Maker. He's coming in with better form. The price is up a little bit, but not enough that I think it matters. So I think it's a pretty safe bet to be close to 30%, plus or minus a couple percentage points.
So I think this is where your risk tolerance comes in, Gup, because if he's going to push 30%, Right now, I'm not playing any. I have 0% Matt Kuchar because all the funds that I would have to allocate to Matt Kuchar, I can then divvy up on like 3 or 4 guys that are right around him who I do think are either equal or better plays than him. I mean, I always want to play the better player. Now, if Matt Kuchar wins, I'm screwed because everyone's going to own him. Or even if he comes inside like the top 3 or top 5, I'm probably screwed by not having him. But is that a decent enough stand to make? If you're going to make a stand, is fading Matt Kuchar something you would even consider?
Yeah, especially if you're in that 2025 lineup type builder, you're doing a bunch of the 20 maxes they have. I think you either have to go almost all in, hit the lock button, or fade. I don't think if you're only building 2025, you can just take equal ownership and gain anything. Obviously, I was 100% off of him for last week at the Valero, and then I was out there for the practice round and watched 4 holes, and I thought he was gonna be tired, and he's striping it, draining putts, and I was like, so that night I went back, and in my final thoughts I wrote up, I went back and got 20% of him or something because he still looked fired up and ready to go. So it's a tough call this week because I think he is in better form maybe than he's ever been coming into the Masters or close to. But the ownership, I agree with you guys. I have him 28% plus, so I think it's not out of the line that he's going to be the number 1 owned guy in the entire field. I just like 3 guys right below him a whole lot, almost as close to. And if I can gain 10 percentage points of ownership or better with those 3 each, I don't mind fading them as well.
That was sort of the similar stance that I was taking, Drewby. But what does the math tell us about someone like Kuchar who could be around 30% owned in a contest like the Millionaire Maker? Does that make him an auto fade, or if you have the conviction that he's going to play well, you play him anyway?
So a year ago, I was probably on the stance of someone like that being an auto fade. If you're just talking about it as an individual player, I think he's substantially over-owned to guys that have similar top 20 probabilities that are right by him. And like fading him outright and pivoting to those guys or pivoting outside the range makes a lot of sense. But as I've like kind of changed my strategy for mass multi-entry, I've evolved a little bit. And just as an example, if we were talking about a JT Bryson build above where you've already separated yourself from 99% of the field, maybe you also have another low-owned guy in the mid-range. And like at that point, you don't really need to differentiate that lineup anymore. If those players are in the top, top 5, you've already differentiated yourself. And at that point, don't you just want the best guy to fill in that 4th spot in your lineup? And Kuchar definitely is one of the best plays in this range and comes in with the good form, the good history that matters at Augusta. So if you've already went contrarian with like 3 other spots, do you really need to fade Kuchar outright on every lineup? I'm not sure that you do. And so because of that, I do expect that I'll own Kuchar in MME. I just think I'll be very careful about the combination of players that I use with him.
I guess the reason that I can stomach fading him and watch him win and just I'll be screwed and everyone else will win all the money and I'll be like my usual self losing all the money. I'm used to it by now. Not that big of a deal. But I look at Leishman, Garcia, Cantlay, and Stenson right below him in the pricing at 78, 77, 77, and 76. Those guys are all as good or potentially better than Kuchar. They don't have the recent form coming in. They're not having the season. They don't necessarily have the course history, but an actual skill set. I like all of those guys just about the same, Drewby. So that would be the reason why I would fade him, because I can get exposure to all those guys, and I think they're just as good.
Yeah, I think there are builds, though, that involve those guys and involve Kuchar as well. And so that's just another factor to throw into the equation and why I think ultimately I'll end up lower than 30%, but probably not full fading Matt Kuchar. In the single lineup in a higher buy-in tournament, I would probably fade Kuchar in that type of context. But in a portfolio of players, I just don't see it being a guy that I want to take the firm stance against.
Gup, of the guys I just mentioned right below Kuchar in the DraftKings pricing, you mentioned that you like some of those guys. Are those the 4 guys that you like?
Not as much Leishman, but yeah, Stenson's my number 1 guy there. And then I like Garcia and Cantlay as well. And, for me, we're not there yet, but under 7,500, there's a lot of dead zone there that I don't like. So, agree with Drewby's point. It's a great point, actually, that, as you're building your lineups, if you can get 15% on them, 20% on them, which is underweight, but it's a contrarian build anyways, that's a great point by him. I do want to get overweight on the 3, Garcia, Cantlay, Stenson. And so I have to see where that shakes out with the total build, but I really like those 3 and Stenson's my top in this area.
Yeah, I actually have Cantlay slightly preferred over Stenson, but I'm using both of those guys. A guy that we kind of glossed over in the 8K range, just to circle back because his ownership could be impacted too. Does anyone have any thoughts on Louis? Gup, are you using him? Because I'm not.
Not right now. If it was going to be just the shit show, wind, storm, rain, really low year, he was good. I mean, he was in the play. Thursday and Friday looks really great, and I think some guys could go low now. He's probably in a bubble. I hadn't ruled him out of the player pool yet, but he's not high on the radar right now.
Drewby, can you explain to people how Louis Oosthuizen is a pyramid scheme?
Yeah, shout out to Davis Maddock who coined this one, and it's just Louis just takes money from you whenever he's popular, and then the one time that he's like overpriced and 1% owned, he funnels it into the Drew Dinkmeyers of the world. So Louis Oosthuizen, definitely a pyramid scheme. I think he'll be in my submission. I just checked my first build. He was in like 3% of lineups. At that point, I don't even know if it's worth it. So I don't know if he'll make the final cut or not, but he'll probably be in the submission.
So he's gaining a bunch of strokes off the tee at the moment, but he did that at the Players and Valspar, 2 shorter courses. When he played API and he played Genesis, he lost off the tee. So right now, essentially, Louis is just chipping everything in and making 70-foot putts. That doesn't seem to me, Colin, like a recipe that's going to continue, but we've seen crazier things happen.
Yeah, I mean, crazier things happen, or you see the random like ace on 17, that the one year that Kuchar did it, that Leone came in second in the Millionaire Maker, and all that stuff matters. But I agree with you. Like, generally, don't love Louis. I do think the fit isn't perfect for him. I do think strokes gained off the tee matters quite a bit at Augusta, regardless of how it plays this year. And so I would, if I'm pivoting off Kuchar, I would prefer to get down to the Cantlay, Sergio, Stenson, Poulter, Woodland range than I would to get up to Louis.
So I like Poulter more than I like Woodland. Woodland I actually don't have in my player pool right now. Statistically, he rates out actually quite fantastically. But just looking at his Augusta history, there's something about this course where he's just not good, Colin.
I know, man. I don't know what to do with it, because even when I tried to make a pretty big adjustment for that, he still ends up in quite a bit of my lineups. And I'm at that point, I feel like I need to kind of get him and keep him in the player pool. I do think years of experience is something that Data Golf showed matters quite a bit at Augusta. Like he at least has those years of experience under his belt. And so that's better than coming in not having seen the course at all. I think that's better than some of the other guys, not the guys necessarily in his range, but some of the other guys that I might have like concerns about. So I'm going to dock Woodland from what our projections suggest, but I don't think it's enough to get him outside of my player pool, especially when you throw the ownership on top of that, and the fact that he's definitely going to be lower owned than Cantlay, Sergio, and Poulter and Kuchar. So I think everything I do to get him out of the player pool, the ownership puts him back in a little bit.
So I'm going Poulter over Woodland. Gup, are you using both, none, or just Woodland?
Right now I have same over Woodland. Same deal. I mean, stat wise, he's all over the place. Looks great. Top 15 in my model, and then rolling stats, he's even looking good. I know his form was. I think people think he was in great form last year just because he had won recently going into here, but after the win he fell apart. So he really wasn't in great form at all. Not that he's in perfect form now or anything, but it's not horrible. But I just the ownership deal is going to be big, and if he's going to be that low, he may wind up getting back into the pool. But right now I'm on Ian, and then I'd actually drop down to someone like Snedeker before Woodland right now.
So I think this is the most interesting range of all. We've kind of all said it's a dead range. This is where the talent drop off comes in, the $7,000 to $7,400 part. But the guy at the very top at $7,500 that I've been talking myself into as the week has gone along. He was initially not on my radar whatsoever. And then I dug in a little bit deeper. He's made two or three cuts the last few years. And just looking at the courses where he's performed well at so far this season, we don't think of Rafa Cabrera as a bummer because he's not, but he's played really well at longer courses so far. And realistically, the only real hiccup that he's had was at the Players when he lost like 6 strokes on approaches, but he put it in the water a whole bunch of times. I think that throwing out Players metrics isn't the craziest thing in the world to do. Other than that, you see that he gained almost 4 strokes to the Valspar off the tee. 4 on approach, lost it all putting. At API, he came third in terms of just strokes gained ball striking. He was almost at 8 total for the week. Couldn't really get it done around the green, still came in third place. At the Genesis, he had a top 25. At the HSBC, when we start going back towards last year, he has a string of really good finishes. Gup, I don't think that anyone's going to own him. And hey, listen, if people are saying, hey, Spaniards play really well, John Rahm could be the 4th Spaniard to win the Masters. I don't think that Rafa is going to win, but I think he could perform pretty well here.
Yeah, so with no Neiman in the field, RCB is my FOMO here. I'll have him. He'll be in there. I've played him way too much in the last 6 to 8 weeks to not play him and watch him top 5 or something. It would crush me. So I think I've got him around 5 to 7% right now. That may even be a little high. So to get, double the field is not going to be hard, and I'll have him for sure. And I agree with some of the stuff you said. And if you do throw out the TPC stats, then he looks even better.
Yeah, what do you make of Rafa Cabrera-Bello, Drew? Because generally speaking at these events, he's always super chalky, but we just talked about the Sergios, the Cantlays, all those guys. They're going to garner ownership, and I can just see Cabrera-Bello being pushed aside.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a sure bet for single-digit ownership. I think Webb right next to him. I think all those guys, like you said, the ownership is going to funnel to the 7,500 plus range and funnel away from this range. So I think that makes Rafa in play for the Millionaire Maker, which is what we're focused on here. The other thing is the DraftKings scoring starts to matter a lot as you get down to the value range, and guys who finish inside the top 30 can outscore guys who finish inside the top 20, especially at Augusta, where more than half of the strokes are gained, or half of the DraftKings points are gained on the 4 par 5s and the short par 4 third hole. So all of that, I think, sets up an environment where it's definitely possible that Rafa finishes 30th, but still outscores guys like, who finish above him, but just can't get to the par 5s to generate eagle opportunities. So I think he's a guy that I would still cap my ownership on. I wouldn't want to take like a 20% stance necessarily on like a 5% owned Rafa, but I definitely want to get overweight the field on him from a leverage perspective.
So the rest of the $7,000 guys, in terms of overall ownership, I think that Charles Howell III at $7,000, who I actually think is quite a good play, but I think everyone kind of thinks that, he's going to garner probably around like 15, potentially up to 20% ownership. A lot of that depends on Charlie Hoffman and where he ends up coming in, because he's just below him, but he's the guy that I see spiking here, and that's kind of it from this range, Drewby. Is there anyone else that pops off?
A couple of the guys I was interested in takes on. So Cameron Smith and Matthew Fitzpatrick, I think if the scoring conditions get really tough, I wouldn't use multiple of them in the same lineup because I just don't think they have DK scoring upside. But I do think that they could flirt with a strong finish if their short games are really on. So I'd like a little bit of interest in those two guys. Matt Wallace, maybe one of the first timers that I'm interested in. And then the big thing I wanted both of your takes on was what the ownership of Keegan Bradley will be, because he's not being talked about very much, but he's somebody that still seems to be popular in most events. And my initial, the model had him projected sub 5% ownership, but I put a pretty healthy manual boost on to get him close to 10%. And I was curious what you guys thought about that ownership projection.
Well, as of right now, he's been generated and spit out in 9% of Fantasy National lineup, so a bit above that. And I think that anyone that uses statistical modeling and does not weight putting all that much it's like how Luke List gets ownership every week and gets all my money every single week. That it's the same way that Keegan gets everyone's money every single week. That I do think that he'll end up around like 5-6%. I don't know if I'm going to use any of them, but I just think where Howell is there, and then when we get into the $6,000 level, there's 3 guys that really kind of stand out as the chalkier plays, that it's just going to be hard for a lot of people to own Keegan Bradley on a mass scale. What do you make of it, Gup?
Yeah, so I think he'll get a manual bump for sure, just off of recency with him. He tends to always come in a little over owned than what some of the projections will show, and I think it would be in the 7,000, and guys, especially if they want to try to get a high 9 and a 10 in, that he could be a guy that they drop down to, which I don't like, because I actually like him this week. I'm going to be on him, unless he just starts showing double-digit ownership type stuff. But as of now, I have him around 8.5%, which is probably a little higher than some. But I don't mind him. I like that he's played here. I don't like that he hadn't made it the last 2 years, but he does have some 3 years worth of memories here, I guess you could say. So he's not drawing dead on never seeing the place. But if he's going to be really high owned, there's enough places in the high 6s to pivot off of, and I don't mind Matt Wallace being. He's one of my first time players that is in my pool right now.
Yeah, Matt Wallace actually rates out over the past 50 rounds and par 5 gained inside the top 5, which I found really surprising. And he played really well at API, and I do think that is a good course to look at, not necessarily to predict winners, but it's long enough that if you don't consider someone a bomber, yet they can still hit their long approaches there's enough water. You need to be precise with those long irons. I do think that's a spot, Justin Rose has played well there over the years, Tiger, Henrik Stenson, that it does seem like a good enough corollary. I still think that Riviera is the one that if you're going to look at any sort of results, that's the one to look at. But the top 5 in terms of par 5 gains right now over the past 50 rounds entering the Masters: Brooks, Casey, Rory, Xander Schauffele, Justin Thomas. I lied. Matt Wallace is actually 6th in that. Adam Long is 7th. And it's Ricky, Tommy, Webb Simpson, and Brendan Grace, shockingly enough, who's in this range as well. Will Gray is reporting on Twitter right now after an interview with Brooks Koepka that Brooks went on an 1,800 calorie per day diet earlier this year to lose weight, but admits he had overdone it. Quote, "You're not going to be in the best physical shape at that point." And Will Gray says it sounds like he's not quite back to 100%. Drewby, is this going to just kill his ownership, do you think? Like, stuff like this actually matters during Masters Week as it pertains to people owning people.
Yeah, I do think it matters. And I think Brooks, there were enough concerns. We didn't talk about him too much above, probably because none of us had a ton of interest in rostering him. And I think there's always that lingering stuff in the back of the mind. And then the other piece is like the lingering narrative about Brooks always getting up for the majors. And so when if there was something that came out from Will Gray that was like, Brooks is ready to go, like he's focused, he's been dialed in on the Masters for the past month, I think that would tick it up. And something like this, I definitely think could tick it down. Maybe take it from like 15 to 10%.
As it pertains to the ownership in this this like $7,000 little mini range here, Drewby, besides Charles Howell, does anyone project over 10%?
No, not over 10. I think Sneds is close. Keegan, I bumped pretty big, and I have him close to 10. But Howell's the only one that I'm confident is going to be 10 and could potentially get over. Like you said, kind of some of the stat stuff to back it up. I think the Masters history is definitely something, not necessarily his performance, but just the growing up on the course and everything, I think is an added element that kind of will boost his ownership.
Yeah, you can get him at 3-1 for top 20 right now. That's actually a bet I'm probably going to get in on. But Gup, I'm looking at my start. The guys I actually have committed to lineups right now. Obviously, that could always change in this range. Rafa at 75, Charles Howell at 7,000. And Hao Tong Lee at $7,200 are the only 3 guys that make it onto my rosters from this range. I am flirting with a decision between Brendan Grace and Matt Wallace, though. And you say you like Matt Wallace. Does Grace do anything for you?
No, Matt Wallace is a guy, and then the one more that's still currently in the pool for me, and I don't think he's been talked about a lot, is Olsen. I kind of like him as a sneaky, way under the radar play this week, and you don't need much ownership there to have a little bit of leverage. So he may come into the pool, and I haven't eliminated him. Everybody else, I'm not having any on right now.
Olsen's really intriguing. He was T41 at the Players. He missed at API, T47 in Mexico, and he had a top 10 over the Middle East swing earlier in the season. But his last 2 Masters performances made the cut both times. It's been a couple years since Thorbjorn has been in here, Drewby, but he had a T6 like 5 years ago.
Yeah, he's one of the guys that one of the European Tour players that I'm just not quite as familiar with, and a guy that I feel like the weeks I've considered rostering him, he ends up highly owned anyways. And so not a lot to add. The one guy I was surprised that popped a little bit in my statistical model was actually Matthew Fitzpatrick, just because I do think of Augusta as more of a bomber's track, and Matthew Fitzpatrick is a short game player, but he has been getting strokes off the tee in the 4 events on the US and getting them up consistently on approach as well. So I think him and Webb Simpson are kind of some of the guys that will be in my player pool.
Yeah, probably best to leave. For me, probably leave those guys to the heritage. And I can tell you where Matthew Fitzpatrick was not good off the tee in that match play against Rory when he kept like hitting it 200 off the tee into the water. That wasn't good. But you're right.
Yeah. If he was good in the API though, and not that it's a substantial correlation like that it was a longer course that we expected to favor players that don't golf like Matthew Fitzpatrick.
True. It just ended up favoring all the Euros at the very top when you looked at the top of the leaderboard. 6K range, most owned from down here. I think it's pretty clear where all the ownership is going. People are going to own Charlie Hoffman at $6,800. People are going to own Keith Mitchell at $6,800. And people are going to own Kevin Kisner at $6,700. Drewby, are those the 3 guys that you see popping off in ownership?
Definitely Hoffman. I think he's a candidate to be one of the highest owned players of the slate. I got him at 17 right now. Wouldn't shock me if it went higher than that by the time lock rolls around on Thursday. Agree with you there. Agree on Kevin Kisner. I'm less certain about Keith Mitchell, Siwoo Kim, and Zach Johnson. So those were some guys I was curious about. Zach Johnson in a public tournament, I think could garner more ownership from name recognition than he would if this was just a week full of DFS regulars. And then for the same reasons, I don't know if Siwoo and Keith Mitchell will get quite as high as we might think in our little bubble.
I don't think that Siwoo will get there. I think enough people watch him melt down in the final round at Valero that's just not going to happen. But Gup, what do you make of the ownership in the 6K level? Do you think, like, I have Hoffman at 18% right now?
Yeah, I think especially, hitting last week as well as he did, he got a big, but probably the guy who'll get the biggest boost pre-Valero, post-Valero, mainly because he has a strong course history. So now everybody sees that he, does really well, almost wins a tournament, definitely will be high up there. I don't know if I'll go there. That could be a point where I could take a stance, especially if I do decide to get on a little more Kuchar or something like that. Mitchell's a guy that I don't mind seeing him go up high because I don't know if I like him as much as I would go to Kisner and eat a little bit of the Kisner chalk. I'd rather go Kisner over Mitchell right now and just take a stance on one of those. I think if you go to both of them or all three, you really start making yourself hard to have a contrarian type lineup build.
So I'm pretty good with not playing any of those guys, to be perfectly honest with you. Charlie Hoffman's the one that intrigues me the most. It's funny. He was 100-1 over the weekend to be first round leader. He's currently at 25-1. So there's a lot of steam coming in on Charlie. Like, he could push 20% in this spot. I have no real interest in Keith Mitchell if he's not putting on Bermuda. That's something I live by. I'm sure he can play well. He has the skill set that you want to see. I'm off of him. I don't think that Kisner has the skill set whatsoever to churn out. Like, he could come top 30. That's fine. And that would be fine for his price point. But I don't think you can win with him just coming like T28. You need someone down here to spike for you. And I don't think that Kevin Kisner, unless the weather gets really crappy, and like we talked about, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday seem to be pretty good conditions, that he's not the type of player that I'm targeting here. So out of those three, I'm good with crossing off Kisner and crossing off Mitchell. The guys that I like from down here, I'll probably end up with a little bit of Siwoo because, I'm a crazy person. But I love JB Holmes, Drewby. I think that he sets up great for this course. He has his Riviera crossover that I love. And he's not playing particularly well coming in, but he's just losing a ton of strokes putting. And that can happen again. He has a fourth place finish here the 2 times ago when he was here. I remember when he won the Shell 3 times ago and he missed the cut. He was like the chalkiest guy going. And then no one owned him the year after when he came T4. I think that he's highly volatile, but he has that winning upside that I would want from a player down here. And like Keith Mitchell, his skill set absolutely fits this course.
Yeah, I like JB from a fit perspective. I'm not willing to write off Keith Mitchell. Now, if you told me he finished dead last, it wouldn't surprise me at all either. But I do like his ability to score from a DraftKings format. And like you said about Kisner, he finishes 30th. Like, it's not going to be super exciting. He's definitely not going to generate a ton of eagle opportunities or birdie streak opportunities. So I think Keith Mitchell and the ability to score on those par 5s could at least outscore wherever he ends up finishing from a DraftKings perspective. And then, like you said, JB Holmes, I think 5% ownership on him until you just touted him, I think was looking like a pretty good number.
Gup, what do you make of JB?
I agree. I don't mind probably being equal. One good thing about Mitchell, for those that, we talk about first time, he is a first time here, but he's played this course many times. He was a Georgia boy in college. And so I know he's been out there and played it. So he has a little bit of an advantage as a first time. Still the putting splits is hard to believe in, but everything else looks good for him. But JB's a guy you just play him and move on. Like, he's not going to pop overall for long-term stuff, but if he gets hot in the, off the tee, definitely he's going to be there. I agree with you that he has, higher winning equity than some other guys down in this range.
Well, when I wrote him up, the big thing that I really noticed about his putting splits is that he's either one of the best players in the field or one of the worst players in the field on the green. He so rarely has like a -1 strokes game putting for the week or a +1. He's like +9 or -7. And those are the sort of like high upside type of plays that I want from down here. Drewby, the only other one that I'm really looking at that I'm committed to right now is, call me an idiot, but I kind of like Griot.
Yeah, the Griot's on my radar. It'll depend how much ownership I allocate to DJ and Rory, because you have to dip down here, or if you're building a bunch of lineups with those guys. So Griot, Wise, and Corey Connors were guys that I'm at least thinking about a little bit. I think one of the things I'm trying to separate with, and I like about JB Holmes, is he does have some outlier characteristics to his golf game, and I feel like you get that with Wise off the tee, especially over the last 3 events, something where he had struggled at the beginning of the season, but he had finished last year so strong. And to see that rebound, I think, is a good thing off the tee, where it could set him up to potentially generate DraftKings scoring. And then Corey Connors too. You're knowing that you're going to get strokes gained off the tee from him. You have tons of concerns about him coming off the win, not being able to see Augusta. I know he played as an amateur, but not being able to see it too much this week. But maybe he's just running on adrenaline and he can keep it going and maybe just make the cut, and that's enough to pay off if you're building star heavy lineups.
So for me, Gup, I'm looking at strokes gained off the tee gained over the past 50 rounds right now. Corey Connors at 6,600 is actually 6th in this field. Keith Mitchell is 7th, tied with Bryson over that time. Aaron Wise is 13th. And the other one who crops up down here is Kiradesh.
Interesting. I know our boy Jeff will be looking to see what outfit he has going on. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that. That's kind of surprising. The one name you just mentioned before him that's kind of still in my pool as now is Aaron Wise. I kind of have him, super low owned, probably less than 2% around there. That he's a guy I could come on down here as most of this range I'm going to be fading, or not, or they've already been cut from my pool. But that's interesting on the rat. I'll have to go look into him a little more. Didn't have him popping just off the top, but Wise was the guy that you said right before him that I do like.
Well, it's really strange with Kiradesh because he's like so good off the tee, but he's been like god awful on approaches. So the ball striking as a whole isn't quite there, just off the tee. He's looking fine. The other one is, did anyone ever take, I can't remember this ever happening, but if the Masters was last week, Drewby, what do you think Beauregard's ownership would have been if this was just a week ago and he was $6,400?
Oh man, I guess it would have been like 8% or something like that, or if he just had a good finish. I do think the only people who are going to own him are like the PGA DFS crowd, and I guess the ejection of last week is probably enough to kill some of that.
Yeah, I was actually hoping he'd play kind of well at Valero so he would garner more ownership and remain popular. Right now, I haven't projected at 3%. I just don't like him on this style of course. He's a great DraftKings scorer because he can make so many birdies over and over and over and over, but he's a first-timer, and he's a gas can. Like, if he shoots 85 one of these days, I'm not going to be super stunned either. And Gup, I always like Beauregard at sort of shorter courses than longer courses. And Augusta, I hear, bit of a long course.
Yeah, I'm 100% fade on him. I agree with you. I was hoping he played well. I didn't play him at all last week either, and I was hoping he would play well because the ownership he had there would carry over to this week. But I think it'll scale back some with him not looking as good, and it really hasn't talked up very much on the pods that I've listened to so far.
All right, Drewby, we'll go to you on this one. In the $6,000 level, who are your guys?
Yeah, so the biggest one is the decision on Charlie Hoffman, and I'm going to come in underweight on Hoffman even after adjusting him for his course history here. I think there's going to be too high ownership on Hoffman, so my guys are going to end up being Emiliano Grillo, Aaron Wise, Corey Connors, and JB Holmes.
So I'm with you on Holmes. I'm with you on Grillo. Victor Hovland do anything for you?
I actually haven't dug as deep into some of the guys super down there as I should. I was noticing that Hovland at least gained strokes in a couple areas, but he's a guy that I don't think will make any of my lineups. I probably won't get that cute even with 150 to build. Probably
the smartest thing to do in that area is not play one of the amateurs, especially the ones from Norway. But hey, who knows? He does gain a bunch off the tee. Holmes, Siwoo Kim, Grillo, and now I'm considering Barn Rat as well, Gup. Who are your guys in the 6K range?
Yeah, Wise is a little bit. Keith or Kisner, I'm going to probably just take a stand on one as I get closer to tomorrow. Other than that, Hoffman, if he's going to be that high, I don't think I can go there. One guy, I think you just mentioned him a little bit, that I'll probably throw in a couple of lineups, and just because I've seen him a lot play at Oklahoma State, and then I know Ricky may help him a little bit around this week. And Victor, I don't mind doing 3 or 4% on him, or even 2%. Plenty. Just because of his off the tee game, I like him enough, and then the rest of this area will just be completely dead.
All right, that'll do it on the Pat Mayo Experience. DraftKings re-up and ownership. Gup, tell everyone what's going on at Gup's Corner and what they can check out this week.
Yeah, last week of our early bird special launched a premium service in February. You can sign up through Sunday night at midnight for $6.99 a month or $69 a year. If you do the annual subscription, you get into our drawing to go to Blue Jack National out in Houston. Moose, founder of Fantasy National, myself and Bucks are going to take the winner out there in a couple weeks and play the course over 3 days, 2 nights. Be a lot of fun. We'll do that drawing after the Masters concludes, and we have our wrap-up show Sunday night. And then Monday it goes back to standard pricing. So now's the time to jump on and join the community. It's going great. It's been a great run over 7 weeks. We really like the way the Slack is coming along. It's a great environment, and looking forward to going out and hanging out with Moose and Buck for a weekend with our guest.
Yeah, so you mentioned Moose and FantasyNational.com. If you're interested in a customizable stat engine, ownership projections, lineup generator, tournament simulator, it is all there, plus more if you become a member. Drewby, what's going on over at Daily Roto?
Yeah, we've got a Masters promo as well, 10% off code with the code Masters19. But biggest thing we're excited about this week is we're actually mass entering the Millionaire Maker on behalf of our subscribers. So we had a drawing yesterday for that. We've got 15 subscribers. We're going to put all our money on the line, split 50% of the profits with them. So if you see Daily Roto at the top of the leaderboard, banking a milli, we're bringing our subscribers along for the ride, and we're really excited about that promotion.
I mean, that sounds like a better way for me to invest my money than actually filling out my own lineups. But that will do it on the Pat Mayo Experience. I'm Pat Mayo. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at the PME. If you follow me on Instagram, heart one of the pictures that pertains to the Masters and leave your DraftKings handle, you're in a draw for 20 DK bucks. If you leave an iTunes review, DK handle, something nice about the show, 5 stars, and sub to that podcast. Downloading helps a lot too, especially during Masters Week to get it spiking to the top of the charts. We're already inside the top 30 on the iTunes charts for sports right now. I'd like to get inside the top 10 for this week for the Pat Mayo Experience, and those reviews will go a long way. I'll announce the winners on Wednesday's show live, 1 p.m. Eastern time. It's the live chat. I'll be taking your questions and finalizing the leaderboard. Plus, if you share the shows on Twitter and Facebook, just retweet, no quote tweet. If you quote tweet, you're automatically disqualified. But if you just reply with your DraftKings handle or comment with your DraftKings handle, you will be in the draw for 20 DK bucks. And smash the like button to this episode. Leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section. Tell me who you think are going to be the 2 highest owned players in the DraftKings Masters Millionaire Maker. Boom, you're in the draw for 20 DK bucks. I got a lot of these to give away, so enter them all as many times as you can, and you'll have more opportunities to win as many times as possible. Plus, the Pat Mayo Experience DraftKings Masters Open. The link is in the description to this video. Already 8,000 people in it, only 2,000 spots left, so go get yours right now. 3 max, $10 entry, $100,000 of rake-free money guaranteed in the prize pool. It's actually the best tournament on DraftKings, so go check that out. But anyway, check out the rest of the shows up on the feed and dkplaybook.com and in the description and comment section of this video. It's all there, so easy to find that you might as well go click on them all. All right? I'm Pat Mayo. Good luck, the Masters Millionaire Maker. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!